Well, this is really exciting. I'm joined by a man I've probably always wanted to speak to, a man, as we know, loves sport, in particular cricket, and a man who has just been named as the patron of the MCC Foundation. Very famous face. Stephen Fry, welcome to Sky Sports News.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the MCC Foundation, in particular, the work that's being done and why you wanted to get involved, I suppose.
Well, what I love about it is it's dedicated to broadening the reach of cricket in Britain. As we all know, there's been a real problem with cricket being the kind of game it is. Kids who grow up in schools where there are cricket grounds have a huge advantage. And about the only schools left in the country that have full cricket grounds and facilities are private schools. And that's only 7% of the population or something. And meanwhile, there are all these boys and girls who are talented, who are untapped and talented, and especially boys and girls from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. And so the MCC Foundation exists to put facilities together with young, talented people. It's that simple. And fortunately, the private schools have opened up their grounds, and other grounds are available around towns and cities, so that there are now 60 hubs around the UK. So if you're watching and you've got a girl or boy who is interested in cricket curious, or is already passionate about the game but hasn't had much of a chance to practice, then all you've got to do is get in touch with us. lords.org/MCC Foundation, I think is the URL, and every possible help will be given to. The only thing is you can't be already a registered player or someone who goes to a private school, because this is deliberately, and I think quite rightly, not for people like me, but for people who just simply haven't had the advantage. Because you can play cricket in parks, you just need a tree trunk and a few local rules, but you can't master the skills really without nets and without proper facilities and without practice at the hardball game in some way. And that's what the MCC Foundation wants to do. We've all seen how popular cricket has become, but because of the Big Bash type franchises, the IPL and so on, but also because the England team is doing so well, both in the women's and the men's game. And it's been a summer where both have flowered immensely. A 5-0 win for the women against the West Indies, and we've seen the marvellous teams from Ireland and the West Indies and Pakistan and Australia come over and play under these extraordinary new circumstances. And it's been a great thing for cricket, and I hope that has meant people have been excited about it. I'm not giving you much chance to ask any more questions. This is my usual style, for which I apologise.
Well, that's because you're normally the presenter. That's why, Stephen.
That's probably what it is, yeah.
You're on the receiving end today. Maybe I should have just let you present, and I could have just chipped in. I'm fascinated by that, the ambition of the MCC Foundation to really drive this diversity. I've read all about the ambitions of the MCC Foundation to really just get more and more players playing and involved. And I remember playing a lot of cricket in parks, but I never had pads. I had a really cheap, knackered old bat, and it was one of those things. It was easy for my parents to say, look, we'll buy you a pair of football boots for 25 quid. But it was more difficult to convince them to buy me full cricket gear. And I remember the step from school to wanting to play for a club was actually quite difficult. I know one of the ambitions is to make that a lot easier.
That's right. It's to fill in those time gaps and those skill gaps to make that leap, which is so important. One of the good things is that in the years it's been around, and I've been supporting it for some time, we've managed to get statistics back, and over 80% of parents have said that they've noticed that their children have improved in terms of happiness and concentration, and half have said they've improved in other disciplines at school as well. And there's a real sense that involving yourself at this level and being from time to time taken seriously as a cricketer, having someone to mentor you through the skills. Because I don't know if you've noticed, I'm sure you have, that one of the things that it has to be said Sky Sport has led with is with a level of commentary and analysis which is infinitely more detailed and infinitely more surprising and interesting to non-cricketers like me in terms of batting triggers and bowling structures and every detail now, because your commentators are all people who played first-class cricket to such a high level, and they're able to see the game so much better with 4K and all the rest of it and the slow-mos. And we're all now more aware, and that means, of course, that your opponents are more aware of all the things that make cricket the extraordinary game it is. And there's generations of children now who've been watching it on television, and they're aware of these things. But, you can't practice leg spin in a park. You've got to have a proper track in order to see it, and you've got to have someone who can watch you and just say, no, it's that elbow's the problem, or, that shoulder isn't coming round enough, the smallest thing, and to get that confidence. And it's because it's a great game, cricket, and a great sport. It's not just about technique, it's also about the mind. And again, another huge change in the world. You can mock the world for going woke and snowflakey as much as you like, but I was of a generation where literally sports teachers would scream in your face that you were a cretin and use words that you would never dare use now, and make you feel ashamed of yourself and physically completely unable. They would wreck your confidence because that bullying favoritism, and also those parents who scream on the sidelines for their children, and that kind of thing is no longer acceptable. And it's not that you don't allow children to hone their competitive spirit, because that's very important, to play at the absolute pitch of your ability and to want to win. But in cricket now, as in most sports, there is a growing sense of mentoring and pastoral care, if you want to call it that, where we understand that the mind, which is the thing that drives the body after all, so you can never be a great sports person unless your mind is clear enough to enter that zone of mixed relaxation and concentration that allows you to play properly. And so the mental health issue is something I think that's one of the reasons they've asked me to be a patron as well, because I'm the president of the charity Mind, which is a mental health charity. And as you know, over the years, cricket has had its problems. It's probably had a higher rate of suicide and things than other sports. There have been some famous cases of that, but also of people leaving the game in real disarray and unhappiness. And they've come forward very bravely. Great players like Jonathan Trott have stepped up, and Marcus Trescothick, to explain how their mind had stopped them from playing the game and how they had to leave it at the highest level. And so part of the MCC Foundation is not just to train the technique, which is of course important, and the competitive edge and the fellowship of playing the game, but also to allow people to be honest about their mind and where they are, and to help them rather than to sort of bully them or pound them into some particular shape that you're supposed to be. And we all know, because if we've seen any of the interviews he's given since his amazing 600th wicket, that James Anderson had a period when he was told to change his technique. And of course, that wasn't just a physical thing. It made his mind scramble too. And he had a kind of really rocky period and was going to leave fast bowling, instead of which he's become the most successful fast bowler in the history of the game in the world. So these things it is possible to see that the modern game is a much more holistic thing. It approaches the mind as well as the body and the spirit.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, actually. I mean, I can actually really identify with that. Well, I've never said it publicly before. I suppose I might as well now. I've had some real trauma myself over the last couple of years. Mentally, certainly, had a few struggles. A lot came, I think, from various breakdown of various relationships. But I also know this year I've found it really tough, and I've had a really difficult personal situation. Lockdown came along, and what I would say is, one thing I've done actually is, when cricket was allowed to be replayed, I joined my local cricket team, New Mills, and it really helped me this summer. Like it genuinely, as a thing, as a thing to get me out, to stop me feeling down, depressed, lonely, anxious. It was absolutely fantastic. So I'm fascinated by the kind of the benefits to your mental health, and I suppose I'm an advocate for it as well. I mean, obviously, it's something that you care deeply about.
Yes, very much so. And I've noticed that some of the kind of some of our cultural figureheads and leaders, David Attenborough being an obvious example, Monty Don, various others, have all spoken about how their particular world and disciplines, wildlife and nature and birdsong or the garden, all these things during lockdown have helped the mind from becoming too upset and disturbed and for anxiety to creep over everything. And it's great that you can talk about it, Ben, and now know that we at least finally live in a culture where you can talk about such things without feeling that your job might be at risk. Oh, can we trust him? That people might look down on you. None of that is true anymore. When I was growing up, you'd hear stories of, those tough granite Yorkshire captains like Brian Close and Ray Illingworth, and how young players coming into the dressing room would be, what the hell, well, then that was, the language was stronger than that, made to feel total failures. I mean, he was a great captain, Illingworth, don't get me wrong. I'm sure he was a wonderful guy as well. But, there was a hardness to it, which it's important not to lose, the competitive edge and spirit that the England team now has is a huge part of its success. So it's not about softening the competitive edge, but it's what the England side, I think, has shown is that you can have that fully and yet also have a supportive dressing room in which people find their levels of the joker, the quiet one, and so on. And there is banter and teasing, as you will always get amongst sports people, but that there's also a genuine sense that if any one of them said, guys, I am so unhappy at the moment, I can't explain it, they could be free to say that. And that's new, I think, and incredibly important for the game and for the long-term survival and happiness of each player.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's something that, even, I'm 38 now, even when I was growing up and going back a few years, you would never have spoken openly necessarily if you were struggling. The sign of being a man, as it were, was always, wasn't it, just to suck it up, get on with it. And I think that has really changed. And I think and also just from my own personal experience and self-awareness, it's really helped knowing that you can have conversations. And as you said earlier, you don't have to be judged. And then when you go into that environment that is a dressing room or a club, and you have to walk through the door and say, hello, I'm 38, I'm Ben, can I play? It's okay.
That's it. You're always back to your first day at school, aren't you, when you do that, when you walk into it. I mean, the only cricket I do these days is umpiring, but even there I feel quite nervous.
Before I let you go, Stephen, I've got to just ask you about the summer, because obviously there was a big black hole and we didn't have much sport at all. Thankfully, we got some cricket back. Initially, the men's team, then the women's team got a series in as well, which is fantastic. A little bit of county cricket, other sports as well. I mean, obviously, football, F1, motorsport, golf, it's all back.
World Championship, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. How was that for you? And was it something that you'd realised you really missed when it started coming back and you could watch all these sports again?
Exactly that, Ben. I had sort of almost given up on the idea that sport would be possible again. Obviously, while the first month or so of lockdown was in progress, there have been endless webinars and conferences and Zooms between the interested parties devising the biosecure protocols that eventually got into place. And so when it began with a bit of cricket, Ireland, and watching that, I thought, yeah, this will work. This really will work. I mean, it's spooky at first, but you very quickly get used to the emptiness and the slight sort of buzz noise that they add as a track. And I thought cricket was sort of worked best of almost all the sports in a way. I mean, obviously, F1 works pretty well too, because you're very rarely aware of the crowds. Even if it's you, as I have, you go to Silverstone, the noise of the engines is so extreme you can't actually hear the crowds. So that worked well. Darts, they found, first they did it in people's drawing rooms, with then now they've found a way of doing it where you're almost convinced that there's a crowd. There's the Grand Prix on at the moment, which is going very well. And tennis has been, had its ups and downs, didn't it? Because there were some embarrassments. And football at first was a bit odd. Some of those early internationals were really turgid. But suddenly the Premiership has shown that you can get matches of extraordinary excitement.
Still in a different way, isn't it? I mean, how many goals have we seen over the last couple of weeks? Absolutely crazy.
Really remarkable. We just need Norwich to start doing better. That's all. The last two matches we've let ourselves down. But yeah, no, it has been a fabulous thing. And even my husband, who's not a great sport lover, has got sort of sucked into it. He now knows the name of the entire England side in cricket, and most snooker players and darts players he can recognise as well, and knows their nicknames. So it's kind of, without really wanting to, he's become part of the great sporting year. No, it's been amazing, Ben, and I have to congratulate Sky because they've done most of it, and they haven't just shirked and said, "Oh, we'll shove a camera here." You've really found ways of bringing it into the home that have been quite magnificent.
That seems like a pretty good place to end then. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate your time. Obviously, fantastic that you're involved now with the MCC Foundation. Look forward to seeing some of these hubs over the winter, and hopefully next summer we get back to a little bit more normality, I guess.
As my grandfather used to say, from your lips to God's ears.